When the bridge was completed, it was the longest suspension bridge in the world, and New York's tallest structure. A suspension bridge brings together the two great forces, compression and tension. The towers are under nothing but compression, as they strain to support the massive steel cables. The steel cables are under nothing but tension, as they strain to hold up the bridge.
The Brooklyn Bridge is one of the oldest suspension bridges in the United States. With a main span of 1,595.5 feet, 486.3 meters, it was the longest suspension bridge in the world from its opening until 1903, and the first steel wire suspension bridge. Contemporaries marveled at what technology was capable of, and the bridge became a symbol of the optimism of the time. John Perry Barlow wrote in the late 20th century of the literal and genuinely religious leap of faith embodied in the Brooklyn Bridge. The Brooklyn Bridge required of its builders faith in their ability to control technology. Their architectural style is neo-Gothic, with characteristic pointed arches above the passageways through the stone towers. The paint scheme of the bridge is Brooklyn Bridge tan and silver, although it has been argued that the original paint was Rawlins red. Roebling designed a bridge and truss system that was 6 times as strong as he thought it needed to be. The Brooklyn Bridge was designated a National Historic Landmark by the federal government and a National Historic Civil Engineering Landmark by the American Society of Civil Engineers. In recent decades, the landmark structure has been refurbished to handle the traffic demands during its second century. The bridge, which now accommodates 6 lanes of automobile traffic, carries approximately 145,000 vehicles per day. After nearly 120 years, the bridge still has the 44th longest main span among the world's suspension bridges. At various times, the bridge has carried horse-drawn and trolley traffic. At present, it has 6 lanes for motor vehicles, with a separate walkway along the center line for pedestrians and bicycles. Due to the roadway's height, 11 feet, 3.4 meters, posted, and weight, 6,000 pounds, 2,700 kilograms, posted, restrictions, commercial vehicles and buses are prohibited from using this bridge. The 2 in-sight graphic lanes once carried elevated trains of the BMT from Brooklyn Points to a terminal at Park Row via Sun Street. Streetcars ran on what are now the 2 center lanes, shared with other traffic, until the elevated lines stopped using the bridge in 1944, when they moved to the protected center tracks. On May 23, 1883, President Chester Arthur and Governor Grover Cleveland officially dedicated the Brooklyn Bridge before more than 14,000 invitees. Emily Roebling was given the first ride over the completed bridge with a rooster, a symbol of victory, in her lap. After the opening ceremony, anyone with a penny for the toll could cross the Brooklyn Bridge. On the first day, the bridge carried trolley lines, horse-drawn vehicles, and even livestock. The Brooklyn Bridge cost $15.1 million to build, $3.8 million of which was to purchase land for approaches and the remainder going toward construction. This was more than twice the original cost estimate of $7 million. Certainly, the Brooklyn Bridge lived up to, and exceeded its great expectations. 10 years after the bridge opened, the city of Brooklyn annexed adjoining towns until it encompassed all of Kings County. In 1898, 15 years after the bridge opened, the bridge helped unite Manhattan with Brooklyn, Queens, the Bronx and Staten Island to form Greater New York. That year, the roadway was configured to allow trolleys and automobiles to travel in the outer lanes. By 1910, the penny toll on the Brooklyn Bridge was removed after the city of New York passed a law prohibiting the use of tolls to finance construction and maintenance of its bridges. In 1944, the elevated railroad trains that run along the interior of the bridge ceased operation, and soon thereafter, the trolley lines ended service. Between 1944 and 1954, noted bridge engineer David Steinman oversaw a comprehensive reconstruction project that saw the inner and outer trusses strengthened, new horizontal stays installed between the 4 main cables, the railroad and trolley tracks removed, the road was widened from 2 lanes to 3 lanes in each direction, and new approach ramps constructed. Additional approach ramps to the FDR Drive opened to traffic in 1969. On May 24, 1983, the 100-year anniversary of the opening of the Brooklyn Bridge was marked by parades, a flotilla of tall ships, and a massive Grucci fireworks show. President Ronald Reagan led a procession of vehicles across the bridge, repeating the route that President Chester Arthur had taken 100 years earlier. Soon after ground was broken on January 3, 1870, work on the Manhattan and Brooklyn foundations. The 3,000-ton pneumatic caissons, large, airtight cylinders in which workers cleared away layers of silt in an atmosphere of compressed air underneath the reverbed, were dug 78 feet below the river on the Manhattan side, and 44 feet below the river on the Brooklyn side. To expedite the descent of the caissons, dynamite was used for the first time in bridge construction. The foundations took 3 years to construct. Between 1873 and 1877, work continued on the anchorages, towers and cables under the direction of Washington Roebling. The 276-foot neo-Gothic granite towers, which feature 2 arched portals, were built to withstand strong winds and provide support for rail lines. In August 1876, the 2 anchorages were linked across the East River for the first time by a wire rope. To commemorate this occasion, and to demonstrate the integrity of the wire rope, master mechanic Farrington crossed the East River riding on a boatswain's chair tied to the rope. In February 1877, not long after the temporary footbridge was finished, work began on spinning the 4 cables at the Manhattan and Brooklyn anchorages. The 4 steel cables, which could each hold 11,200 tons, connect the anchorages with the Manhattan and Brooklyn towers, where the cables pass over saddles within the towers. Each main cable, which has a diameter of 15 inches, is comprised of 19 strands containing a total of 5,434 steel wires. Once the spinning of the 4 main cables was completed in October 1878, workmen strung wire ropes from the cables down to the bridge floor. More than 14,400 miles of wire were used for the suspender ropes. After the suspending ropes and deck beams were in place, the diagonal stays were installed. From one end to the other, the Brooklyn Bridge measures 6,016 feet, including approaches. The long river span passes the tower arches at an elevation of 119 feet, gradually rising to 135 feet above the East River at mid-span to accommodate passage of even the tallest ships. The 135-foot clearance soon became the standard for bridge construction. Because of the elevation of the span above the East River and the relatively low-lying shores, the rest of the bridge, sloping down to ground level, had to extend quite far inland on both sides of the river to provide an easy 3 1/4% grade. Roebling designed the Brooklyn Bridge to have a load capacity of 18,700 tons. He planned to run 2 elevated railroad tracks, which were to connect to elevated railroad systems in New York and Brooklyn, down the center of the bridge. On either side of the tracks, he designed 4 lanes, 2 lanes on 2 outer roadways, for use by carriages and horseback riders. Directly over the tracks, he provided an elevated promenade for pedestrians and bicyclists. To support the load, and to protect the span from high winds and vibrations, deep stiffening trusses were constructed. Indeed, construction was delayed because Roebling had to redesign the trusses for the heavier trains of the day. At the beginning of 1883, with the Brooklyn Bridge nearing completion, 2 final details had to be worked out before it opened. First, 2 terminal buildings, complete with ornate ironwork and plate glass windows, were to be constructed at the Manhattan and Brooklyn ends of the bridge. Second, 70 blue-white, electric arc lamps were to be installed along the promenade at intervals of about 100 feet. Roebling gave these last details his full attention. The modernist American poet Hart Crane used the Brooklyn Bridge as a central metaphor and organizing structure for his second and most important book of poetry, The Bridge. This book takes the form of a long poem spanning 8 parts, beginning with an ode, Prome, to Brooklyn Bridge, and ending with a transfigured vision of the bridge as the unifying symbol of America, Atlantis. Crane briefly lived in an apartment overlooking the bridge that, he later learned, once housed Washington Roebling, the Brooklyn Bridge's builder and son of its architect, John A. Roebling. It has been shown in films such as It Happened in Brooklyn, Once Upon a Time in America, Captive Women, The Fifth Element, Deep Impact, Godzilla, Aftershock, Earthquake in New York, Gangs of New York, I Am Legend, Life After People, Cloverfield, Zombie 2, Oliver and Company, Enchanted, Step Up 3D, and Kate and Leopold.